Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. Over the next 2 days, we're going to be talking about our upcoming pilgrimage to Chartres in France. Every year for 17 years now, Ubiquity University has led a group of pilgrims to Chartres, which is about 40 miles west of Paris, a site that for thousands of years has been revered as a place of particular potency, having to do with an energetic quality of the sacred feminine. It was discovered actually by the Druids over 3,000 years ago as they came into Western Europe from Central Europe. And when they came to Chartres, they discerned an energy that they felt was the most potent energy in all of Europe. So every year for over 1,500 years, the Celtic people under the leadership of the Druids, which was their priestly class, would gather in Chartres. It was called their Vatican, their seat. And they discerned an energy there of the divine feminine that they understood to be a source of healing, a source of illumination, and a portal to enabling humans to become more fully potentiated and in alignment with both divinity and the larger ecosystem. When the Christians took over 2,000 years ago, they revered the site just as the Druids have done. And today stands Chartres Cathedral, known as the Queen of the Cathedrals, one of the most magnificent architectural masterpieces ever designed and built by human imagination and human hands. And so every year we make pilgrimage so that we can be graced by the earth energies, the telluric energies that emanate from that place. And in the sacredness of the feminine, we consecrate ourselves, seek to renew ourselves as all pilgrims do, wherever they make pilgrimage. This year, we're developing a new program that we've envisioned for a number of years, but due to COVID and various other vicissitudes of fate, we haven't been able to fulfill until this year. And that is the inclusion of a youth program. We do it with an awareness that young people, literally all over the world, are under increasing stress, are being subjected to technologies and media that are unprecedented in history. And so we have a program, which is, we've used the term a Jedi warrior school. We're wanting to empower young people with a capacity to interact with the invisible world, with the Force, if you remember Star Wars, that unites all of the universe together and is malleable. It's accessible if we simply go through the practices that enable us to align with these deep forces. And so that's what we're going to be discussing, and we're highlighting this on Humanity Rising because we hope that any of you parents out there, any of you young people out there in our global audience that really want to empower yourselves will make the opportunity available. We gather between the 2nd and the 8th of July, so it's coming up in a couple of months. I'll put the link to the course description in the chat, but for those of you who are watching over Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, just go to ubiquityuniversity.org and you'll see the Chartres Academy and the opportunity right there at the top of the homepage. So That's our program for today. We're very excited about what we can do with youth and for youth at this critical time when youth very deeply are suffering because of current world conditions. Before we jump into our program, let us just pause, as we always do as we begin our programs here on Humanity Rising, and simply breathe consciously and coherently together. So for those of you who are new, in a moment, you're going to hear the sound of a bell. When you hear the bell, just breathe in for about 5.5 seconds. And you'll hear another bell. And then just breathe out for about 5.5 seconds. That's about 5.5 breaths in a minute. You ingest about 5.5 liters of air. And it's one of the most cohesifying and harmonizing and empowering ways to breathe. We're going to take 10 breaths together, and then we'll begin our program. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. You may have noted the icon as we were breathing together is a 5-pointed star. Just for everyone's information, that's actually what the combined orbital pathways of the Earth and Venus, that's the pictograph they make as they circumambulate the sun. It's a 5-pointed star. And the number of Venus is 5. And that's also the number of the ancient Greek and Roman goddess Aphrodite, Inanna in Mesopotamia. There was a deep understanding that the number 5 is associated with the Great Mother and the divine feminine. And so as we breathe together to this cadence of 5 in and 5 out, we're really breathing in the feminine. We're breathing out the feminine. And that's why we go to Chartres every year and we make pilgrimage there, because to take a week, 7 days in an initiatory process enveloped by the energetic quality of the Great Mother is one of the most rejuvenating and healing things that one can do, particularly in a world such as ours, which is fraught with escalating climate turbulence, geostrategic chaos, and destabilization and disruptions of all kinds. How we bring coherence to our beings, how we bring coherence to our communities is an imperative that all of us need to urgently tend to. And that's why we breathe together. And that's why we make pilgrimage to Chartres. And that's why we're at this time of duress for young people all over the world. We want to provide an opportunity for them to access and develop their own deep human potential. So it's in this spirit that I'm delighted to introduce the coordinator of our youth program as we get going in Chartres, Paula Petrie, a PhD, and the founder of Destiny Code, which is designed to animate young people to their human potential. So I want to welcome you, Paula, to our program, and thank you for everything that you're doing to bring a youth presence to our Chartres Academy, and turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's an honor. It's an honor to be part of Ubiquity and to be a part of this Chartres experience coming up this summer. Last summer was divine, and as you were explaining this symbology this morning, it took me back to sitting in those rooms and hearing about all of it, and the inside view of the cathedral, and learning about the rose windows and their history and all the symbols behind it, and bringing that energy so clearly into each one of us that were there and participating. And I'm excited that youth have the potential to participate in that. I want to start out this morning with some statistics, because as Jim mentioned, it is a global crisis, and we hear about it, we might sense it, but let me ground you in a little bit of what that means statistically. And in the JAMA Pediatrics Journal, March 2023, there was a meta-analysis of 29 quality studies, and they looked at youth globally, and they found a prevalence of higher rates of depression and anxiety in North America, Europe, and Asia. Prior to COVID, the global estimates for depression were 8.5%. Now it's 23.8%, and anxiety was 11.6%, and now it's 19%. Important, also, they reported that the worldwide mental health services are largely unavailable, and children are on waiting lists or just not getting services. But this speaks to what Sharon Hoover, co-director of the National Center for School Mental Health, recently said in an interview. We cannot treat our way out of this problem. There are not enough therapists, and such that it needs to be a public health model. And today we're going to bring forth some new solutions of another kind that really fit into, in our way of thinking, what a public health model could look like for youth. According to UNICEF, 1 in 7 adolescents aged 10 to 19 are currently diagnosed globally with mental disorders. According to the Global Burden of Disease 219, self-inflicted injuries are a main cause of death worldwide in adolescents. Canada, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, suicide is I may stop reading as I go down the list, but suicide is the second leading cause of death for those aged 15 to 24. Suicide is the leading cause of death for young people in US, England, and Wales and Australia in certain age categories. In Australia, 1 in 7 young people, 4 to 17 years of age, experience mental health condition in any given year. In the UK, 1 in 10 children have a diagnosable mental health problem. In India, the National Crime Records Bureau reports in 2019 that suicide is rising. 7.5% of Indian youth experience significant mental health issues. Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry have found that the prevalence of mental health disorders among U.S. children and adolescents was higher than in 10 other developed countries. The WHO, the WHO, the World Health Organization found the same thing, identified poverty, racism, and social inequality as factors contributing to poor mental health outcomes. If we drill down in the United States, suicide death rates in 2020, they were highest among American Indian, much higher in the 20%, and Alaska Native people and males living in rural areas. In the CDC report for girls in the US, 3 in 5 feel persistent sadness and helplessness. And this report came out 2 months ago, and it really left everyone aghast here in the United States. 25% have made a suicide plan, 14% have been forced to have sex, 22% of the LGBTQ community have attempted suicide in the past year. So we are in an era, what I believe is an era of listening in addition to doing, because I believe that, and today represents that in terms of listening to youth, because it will be with youth that we help pave this way forward for them. But helping us hear and define the problem through their eyes is really, really important. By listening together, I really feel that we're going to find solutions of a really different kind. And so I would like all the panelists now to join me and turn on your videos as I introduce you. It's really exciting that everyone has been able to join today. We have amazing group of teens that are active in their communities that can speak to the issues that we just talked about personally, and others who are actively contributing to solutions that are new. Casper Drummond is an IB student from the UK living in France, specializing in geopolitics, economics, and philosophy. He's attended Ubiquity University's Chartres Academy Mystery School since he's 11 years old. Milo Griffin is 13 years old, lives on Bainbridge Island in the state of Washington, where she attends middle school. And Milo was selected this year as a natural helper by her school peers and is a student of art and French. Katrina Godfrey is 13 years old, attends middle school on Bainbridge Island. She is learning guitar and piano, sings in a choir. She loves educating herself on mental health issues. Chris Damons is a chartered financial planner who loves helping people achieve their financial goals so that they can live the lives that they most want. 6 years ago, he resolved his dilemma. I'll paraphrase. Oh my gosh, my daughter's 13. How can I connect with a teenager? This feels new. And so he resolved it by creating a podcast with his daughter, Charlotte, and they're here to talk about it. Turned into the Kindness Project, and their new book out is that as well. They now have 50,000 listeners. Charlotte is 19 years old and is studying at university in Glasgow and takes the lessons that she's learned from her family, her environment, and this Kindness Project into the world as she begins her life and moving into adulthood. And in this time, she's experienced highs and lows and is here to share with us. TJ Power is a neuroscientist, the co-founder of Neurofi, an international speaker on the topic of mental health, began his career lecturing in psychology and before launching Neurofi, which was during COVID to support companies and schools across Europe. He's now delivered hundreds of training experiences and has trained thousands of youth talking about our biochemistry and how we can come into alignment with our own selves, right? Our own inner biology in order to find that balance and create the lives that we so want. So thank you, everybody, for joining in this morning. So I want to start with some general questions. It's you remember to unmute. If you want to live unmuted right now, that's fine. If there's no noise in the background, that works. Jump in and just however this speaks to you. But starting with the teens, what do you wish others knew about? What do you wish others knew about the youth today? And what you're going through as individually or collectively. Who would like to speak to that? Casper, would you like to begin? Thank you. Welcome.
So I feel like people need to know that youth these days don't feel like, well, I'm talking from my personal experience,
right?
That we don't feel like we have a place where we can come together with people that are like-minded as us. And I feel like the first place that I was able to feel this was at Sharp, even though it was with adults who are far older than me. But yeah, I think there's a real need for people to be able to connect together in a space, which is definitely what Sharp's trying to offer this year. And I think it's really special to be able to bring youth together to converse about what's going on with them and not just with adults.
Wonderful. Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about Sharts, what you experienced there that was unique, and maybe how it also helps you in your current life? You also are under a lot of pressures, and how this maybe worldview, you'd almost say, guides you.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a funny way that it happened my first time going to Sharp. It was after traveling around the world, we were landed in Sharp, really, and we saw that this was going on. My mum was inspired by all the teachers that were there, and I ended up getting, well, at first I ended up getting dragged along to this place. I was like, oh no, it's just going to be these old people drabbing on about things we don't care about. But I discovered that there were actually people who care about us and who care about the future. And I felt like there was a real group of people who want to change things rather than just talking about it and saying, oh, we need to transmute this.
Wow. Wow. And so it affected you in being part of a community, I hear you saying. And then, okay. And then what did you take away in terms of learning? Anything you want to share for other youth potentially listening that you took away that you've incorporated into your life?
Well, concretely, everything that I learned at Sharp, funnily, kind of helped me with my studies in the future. So, like when we were doing Pythagoras and Plato and things like this when we were doing Arithmetica and Geometry, I think it was the first years that I was there. And these things all helped me with just everyday school. But obviously, there's a lot more layers added onto that. But yeah, you can take away very concrete things for every day.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else? What do you wish? What do you wish the world knew about youth and what the needs are? Katrina?
Yeah. I think a lot of our youth today, excuse me, we grew up a little bit faster than past generations. We have a lot more access to internet and other areas like that. So we kind of learn things faster, and that might not always be a good thing. And I feel like a lot of us are just ignored just because we're young, but just because we're young doesn't mean we're wrong. And our feelings matter and our voice matters. And I feel like a lot of us are being taught to just struggle silently because we're being invalidated as our feelings, but they do matter. And I think also that mental health doesn't start at a certain age. It depends on everyone's situation. So just being open to that, knowing that all of us have a different story and all of our feelings matter.
So really feeling needing the need to really feel validated and listened to, and that your feelings matter.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. And Milo, what Milo? What do you wish the world knew?
I wish the world knew that like times have changed a lot since like for example, our parents have been kids. Like Katrina's saying, we like people who are like even in like their 30s or 40s, they grew up with the internet. They grew up with the internet, but like we grew up having the internet.
Honey, Katrina's talking.
Mom, go away, please.
Sorry.
Okay.
This is so classic. Oh my gosh.
So
What
basically,
you're saying is great, Milo.
thank you.
you.
But like basically, we grew up having the internet, and they grew up like either with the internet or like seeing it, like evolve over time. But we grew up having it, so like it's a much different situation because we had access to like every piece of information ever, and they didn't. And it can leave us in like a difficult position where they treat us like especially just like differently from how I think we should be treated, because like they'll treat us more like, I'm trying to say, like, how do I explain this? Like they treat us like when they were kids, like with the same rules, but it's different now, so we need different rules. Does that make sense?
And
I think
what
that's a fair point.
yeah, that's and what rules would you give us an example of a rule that you think applies to today's situation for you?
Maybe like when you take kids' phones away, maybe like when they're being bad, you're kind of taking away like their main source of communication with a lot of people, so that can isolate them as well. So like maybe try talking to them more instead of just like taking the things they like enjoy having away.
And phones are big, right? And Katrina, you want to add to that?
Yeah,
Thank
just
you,
kind of
Milo.
going on that when you don't try to talk to your kids or the youth, they will go and find other ways to cope, usually online. And that's how I think, speaking from personal experience and other people, to find extremely unhealthy coping mechanisms as well as self-harm or substance abuse, because other people suggest it and you don't really have anyone else to go to, because your phone or online is really all that you really know to have to communicate with others and to connect.
And everything's there, right? You have access to information that's not necessarily supportive, and we're gonna get to that. Absolutely. Charlotte, would you want to jump in there? And what do you think the youth? What do we need to know?
I think, yeah, there's a lot to be said about like, there's a lot of things that sort of come and go, but the internet has always sort of been with this generation, as it's sort of like a part of our everyday. But there are also like part of the things that come and go. There are sort of changes that are happening that people kind of, I say people, I mean like youths sort of are told they're going to struggle with, and it sort of becomes like an accepted fact. Like I know a lot of people who have accepted the fact that they will never own a house, and that's just that. And they don't really think of it as a possibility anymore because of the world telling them we're never going to be able to afford it, we're never going to be able to do it. And you know, as much as statistics say it's true, if we're not trying, then there's no way at all to do it.
I know. No, the motivation, right, is a big factor right now. The lack of motivation, lack of dreams. What struck anyone here today regarding the statistics that I read? Did you find yourself in those statistics? Did you find yourself, Katrina?
I think it's so unfortunate how those statistics you read. But yes, I think they do apply to a lot of the youth today, including myself and people I just know around school, which I don't think is commonly known, and I think it should be. And it should be brought to the awareness of a lot of people around the world and a lot of adults and leaders today that can help.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. And to teens, do you feel the world is prepared for you? You know, we think of teenagers like spring, right? It's the coming out, it's the celebration, it's a phase of life where one transitions into beginning that transition into adulthood. And do you feel that the world is prepared for you? How do you see your future? How are you responding to what's going on as a teen and feeling part of it or not? Is the world prepared for you? Are you different? Do you feel that this generation has come in perhaps a bit different, and people really aren't aware, prepared for you?
I can speak if you want.
Yeah, Casper.
Yeah, so I feel that the world is as prepared as it can be. I feel like every generation goes through its period of change. And there's a massive period of change going on at the moment concerning infotech and biotech and the advancements that have been made in them fields that's affecting our everyday life. Kind of like what telephones and internet did to our parents and machines did to our grandparents. And I think it's a massive time of change for us all, including us, because we're being AI is being pushed on us, and we're asking, will we have a place to work when we're older? Will we have a role in society when everything's run by AI and machines? And I feel like the world is ready for us, and they're expecting this period of change, even though some people don't want to accept that that's happening, but aren't ready for it.
Mm. And how do you see your future?
I feel like I want to have a role to play in solutions to our problems, which is definitely a field that's being opened up by climate change, because we can look at it on a bad point of view and how it's affecting our world, but it's also opening up a field of work for children our age of finding these solutions. And many people have to do it. And no matter what background you're from, no matter how privileged you are, everyone has a voice in finding solutions and problems.
I feel that that's a key. The key to almost unlock the challenge right now is this moving from what the world is doing to us to being empowered to feel that one is part of the solution. That's what I am hearing you say. Yeah.
We shouldn't see everything that's going on as a burden, even though it is, and it is affecting us. We can transform it into something that pushes us and helps us.
Absolutely. Beautiful. And what do you think is your mindset? What would you say to other youth that feel more on the victim and feel that what's in front of them is so much larger than the resources they have, right? And how can youth get over that to be feeling really part of the solution and participating?
Well,
what would help?
Understandable to, feel that way, and that's okay if you do, because it's daunting, the whole thing. And I think for anyone to understand what's facing us in the future is something hard to face, and especially kids who aren't as favored as us, or who are from a minority group, who already have to deal with kind of racism and discrimination based on just what they look like compared to who they are. Yeah. And I think everyone should feel they have a valid place, no matter who they are or where they come from.
So youth feeling that when they experience that they have a valid place and they have a valid voice, it's empowering. Mm-hmm. And so helping youth transcend and into that place of empowerment could be an important role
Yeah,
for
definitely.
society. You feel okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could take on that role of developing that leadership perspective. It's really a leadership perspective, right? When
Mhm.
we feel that we're part of the solution. Beautiful. I know, Milo, you know, you're a natural helper in your school, and I'm wondering if could you talk about that, how you were selected, and is that part of developing leaders for tomorrow? Tell us about that.
So basically how you get selected for natural helpers is we were given a form, and you had to fill out 2 names of people like that you trusted. It could be an adult, it could be a kid, but like 2 names of people that you trusted to like tell them about something like personal, or like if you were feeling suicidal, for example. And I was one of the people that's name showed up multiple times, to the point where they added me to Natural Helpers, the group. And basically it's not really to like make exactly leaders. It's kind of just to like it's kind of like a support group almost for those who need help with like mostly anything, like if they need someone to talk to mainly.
Mm.
Then they can go to Natural Helpers and get help, kind of, if that helps explain it. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do they seek you out, or do they go to the office and say, I need a natural helper, and or they just come to you because you're identified? How does that work?
I'm pretty sure they can either go to the office and ask, or they can like they can probably like ask one of the teachers that helps run like the club. It's kind of like there's like a bunch of like clubs at school, but Natural Helpers is kind of like to put it in perspective, like if all the clubs were like on a stage, Natural Helpers would be like the crew in the back. Like it's not very like public club.
Mhm. And did you receive training about that? How did you? Amazing. I would congratulate you on being selected, by the way. That's amazing. That's beautiful, right? And from your peers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There wasn't really much training, because you can't really train someone to be like empathetic, really. Like you can like help them be empathetic, but you can't train someone to be empathetic. But we have had meetings talking about like what we can do to help people, like, and like make them feel more safe and secure in like our school environment, as well on like trusting activities, like how to help with people trusting you, how you can help like yourself trusting others, kind of like that.
Wow. What was a good takeaway? Is there a good takeaway that you would like to share with us?
Like from Natural Helpers, like a takeaway from Natural Helpers.
Yeah, like how do you help people build trust? How do you help people with that? It's a big concern right now, right? Of this of being able to trust others and be able to share your feelings. So everybody gets caught up with their feelings stuck inside, which they just grow, right? And there's no outlet for them. And yeah, any takeaways around trust, what you've learned, or who you are, and what puts you in that role of being trusted?
Yeah, I think one takeaway I would take away is probably like just like try to be there for someone if you notice they're having like a hard time. Like not to like force them to trust you, or like you're only helping them to get them to trust you, but like if you want trust, you have to trust first. So you kind of have to like, so a good way to do that is like you can just be there for someone and maybe become their friend. Because yeah, that's the thing I would take away probably the most.
It's just really being with people.
Yeah.
And being with people, right? So there is no computers, there's no, there is no cell phone, there's the personal contact. Do you feel, an open question for all of you, do you feel teens are missing the one-on-one, the face-to-face, the personal side of life. I don't know, Charlotte, do you feel missing in your circles? You're at the university.
I don't think it's necessarily missing. I think we've just sort of, in my mind, it's sort of just adapted. As much as there is a barrage of people telling you what you can't do, there's also, I'm really grateful to sort of the generation I was born into, because you look back on the past generations and you look at sort of how closed off they seem about talking about things. And I think, this generation, the next one, are a lot better about communicating when they're having a hard time, because like you listen to people tell stories about like their life and their parents and grandparents and all that, and how they just don't talk about their feelings, and it can be difficult if you want to talk. But I think our generation has got a lot better about communicating and sort of understanding that communication is necessary. So even if we're using, devices and stuff like that, it becomes more of a shortcut than complete cut off of communication. So while there is sort of a distance, there's still more communication than there used to be, even if it's in a different form now.
Sorry, Paula.
Interesting point. Yes,
I'm
Chris.
so curious now. I'd like to ask a question. I know she's only sitting next to me, but
Please,
I'd love
TJ,
to
jump in too for questions.
You're
Absolutely.
Okay, so I suppose that perspective about being more open in terms of the communication's an interesting one. What do you think's moved on from generation to generation, and what are we better at talking about in your generation than we were in mine or granddad's or somebody else's?
I just, mental health is definitely one.
I agree. Yeah.
Just generally the way we're feeling, because there are times that you talk to your grandparents or anyone else is that, and they just cut it off before it gets that like
it's the iron
touchy
fire.
feel.
Yeah.
And I remember like sort of growing up, and then I think sort of I've noticed like a lack of communication amongst the older generations, that just there are certain things that like you and granddad won't say to each other, but I'm free to say to you because I understand. But also there are things you don't say to your friends that
you would say
I would say to my friends.
I get that.
Because of
And do you think sorry, Paula, one more question, I promise I'll let you go. Do you think that part of the reason some of the statistics that Paula mentioned at the start were quite shocking, really? Do you think part of the reason they might be there is because actually we're more open about it now, or do you think there's a mental health challenge?
There is a level of people are saying, I'll just push it down less. But I also think there is that level of the world is pushing us a little bit, but also treating us like we're weak for opening up and communicating. Like we're not weak for saying we're struggling. But people are treating us like we're weak for saying we're struggling, which puts more pressure on us. And
Interesting.
I think those are very good points there, Charlotte. I think definitely there has been more attention put on mental health, but the world that young people are growing up in now is very, very different and can be a lot more overwhelming and a lot more to think about, and friendships are very different and stuff like that. So I think it's very fair that young people are wanting to open up and find a solution to this, for sure.
And how about bullying? Yes, absolutely. Friendships are different, are very different, right? And the environments are different. And within these, bullying has become such center stage of what people are experiencing and what the media and what we're talking about, right? And trying to understand the impact that's happening primarily through social media is one of the mechanisms, where people feel either purposely excluded, or purposely picked on. It can be both things that have an impact and probably more. I don't know, Katrina, do you want to speak about bullying? I know you've had your own personal experiences. Could you highlight us, inform us a bit about it and what that experience is and how do you manage that?
Yeah. So sixth grade was coming back from the all pretty much online year of school, and my bullying experience was a little bit different than what you would see commonly in movies or whatever, where some random kid is coming up to you and saying something rude. It was from my own friends, who I thought, even from my best friend, who I thought was the person that would be there for me always. Just like waking up and not feeling safe to go to school and knowing that you're going to be told constantly horrible things about yourself. I experienced discrimination because of my sexuality, but I wasn't always aware what was going on because I was being extremely manipulated by my friends. I was being body shamed. My friends were trying to put me on diets, like a lot of horrible things that at the time I just didn't know that what was wrong because I was just a kid. I didn't really know a lot. And that was just last year. And it got to a point where the school didn't know what to do because I tried to talk to the counselors and their only suggestion was really, do you want to talk with these people? And that's not going to do anything. Just telling them this is wrong. They know that's wrong. They probably do that on purpose. So I had to leave school and I had to do the rest of the year at home by myself, just on Google Classroom. So I didn't really have like a homeschool program or anything, but I basically had to meet myself again and get to know myself and rediscover myself because I had lost so much sense of identity because I was constantly being told what I was doing wrong. And it's been a while since anyone ever really cared about like, who are you when no one else is telling you who you should be. And it took me multiple months of therapy and mental health help to kind of get to that point where I was okay with being alone and not being lonely and knowing that that's okay. And because I was at that point where I was going to school because I'd rather be with really bad friends than be alone because it was unsafe for me by myself at that point. So I would put myself in that situation because to me, it seemed better than being with myself because I thought so low of myself.
Yeah. And share it with other youth, also with parents that are listening. What switched for you with therapy? What do you feel? What changed within you? What did you discover with being time by yourself and that reflection that can happen in therapy and other types of modalities?
I was very fortunate for me and my family to be able to afford therapy. And I started kind of before the main problem really went down. But I think a lot of it was just discovering what was going on with me, because I think a lot of it was, why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? And even being told by those same people, oh, she's faking it, this isn't true, even after I left school, just kind of the learning to stop caring, because just trying to learn that those opinions don't matter because they don't care about me. And just learning that my mental health issues are something that's real and something that's now common for a lot of teens. And just learning how to deal with that and how to help myself, and just really meeting people that were good for me. And I think going back to school this year, I've definitely grown a lot as a person and just kind of maturing. And I feel like if you ask almost everyone, middle school is always described as like the worst years of your school year. So I think definitely it's very important to be educating the youth on what's not okay and what's okay, and what, they need to be setting boundaries for themselves in order to keep their mental health, in shape or better than horrible, or, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
when it gets to that point where we care, especially with social media, where we care so much about what others think.
Yes.
We become unsafe to ourselves. And I became enslaved to myself, and I didn't want to be there anymore. And I lost a lot of people through that process. But it's something I wouldn't take back, because I've grown so much as a person since then. And I don't think I'd be the same without that. And in a good way, though, too. Just how much I've learned, how much I've grown, and how much I can pass on to others through future relationships and friendships as I go on.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much. That had really honored that. And I'm going to turn to you, TJ, because you've had your ear to the ground the last couple of years with teens, and this must resonate with you, right? What you're hearing today. And you've created something, the Dose, I'll call it the Dose program. But share with us your program, your approach, and what you're hearing, and what all of us could benefit from knowing. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everyone for having me, and thanks everyone for choosing to come and attend something like this. I'm someone that cares a crazy amount about mental health and young people's mental health, and I always think it's so cool when people decide to put their time into these things. And Katrina and Casper and Milo and Charlotte, this is a good thing to be doing whilst you're your age. I admire it massively. I wish I had been into it as young as you guys are. So nice work. Yeah, so I've been working in this space now for about 4 years. I basically studied psychology at university and then mastered and went into the world of becoming a neuroscientist and started really studying our brain and how our modern world is affecting our brain. I'm someone that grew up definitely experiencing challenges in my own mind. I'm 25 now, and I experienced many challenges. I had a lot of family loss, which was really hard, and grief and things like that. And similarly grew up in a world of social media that comes with its own difficulties, and have really devoted myself to this world. And yeah, Paula asked me to build out a bit of slides around what we do, and I'm going to take you guys through that now. And this is actually going to be interactive. So ironically, I'm going to ask you to get your phone out and you'll be scanning a QR code in a second. It just means that we can have a bit of an interactive discussion. So,
and this is for everybody. Right?
This is everyone watching. And with that, I guide you when you get your phone out, you're then going to see your WhatsApp or your TikTok or your Instagram. If you can try and avoid going into that and staying in the game of the conversation, then yes, that would be awesome. So before I scan you in, just a tiny bit of back context. This company I run is called Neurofi Dose, is this main thing that I'm going to give you a bit of an idea of in a moment. And it's basically an acronym for the brain chemicals that you may have heard of. Dopamine, super famous in our modern world, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. This is a model we built out a number of years ago and have been progressively diving deeper into how this can help young people. And I spend my whole life now chatting to young people, getting their perspective. And really, I feel it's the young people that have the answer to this question. I think it's amazing that adults care so much and want to help young people. But I think it's young people that really know. And effectively what we're doing with this is trying to give young people a voice and give them their opportunity to share what they think the solution would be. Run the business with a guy called Stein, and then we have a nice team of people that we've built out that help us with this, including lots of young people, and work across Europe and now internationally with schools. And then we also work with companies. We ironically work with TikTok, and it's pretty funny given that a lot of the challenges may come as a result of these platforms. But that gives you a bit of an idea of what we do. So I'm going to get you to scan this QR code. So if you just take out your camera on your phone, open the camera, if you click where the QR code is, a yellow box will come up. That's if you're on an iPhone. If you're on a Android, then it might be time that you get an iPhone. No, I'm joking. If you're on an Android, there'll be like some kind of QR code app or something like that, and you'll be able to scan in. I'm sure in COVID, when you attempted to order a drink in a pub, you might have had to use a QR code. Once you're in, it should just say this on your screen. You'll see these words. If you could just hit the heart, it lets me know that you're now in the software. I think there's something like 80 people in this call. You can see the number in the bottom right. If we can just get that number up to like 50 or something like that, so we know lots of people are involved, that would be amazing. Okay, so yeah, when you've scanned in, then just click the heart that's on your screen. You'll see at the top, it also says menti.com. If for any reason, like scanning the QR code doesn't work for you, you can just Google the word Menti or type in menti.com in your browser. And then you put the number in that's on your screen there, 84376047, and it gets you in. And this is good if you can be in the interactive parks. It's going to give you a chance to kind of anonymously share your perspective. Okay. So I'll give it a few more secs for everyone to join. Okay. I'll kick it off. And then if you want to join back in, all you're doing, menti.com, you can see at the top of the screen, code is there. That'll be there throughout. So let me ask you this question. This can just give us an idea. What country are you in right now? There'll be a box on your phone screen. You can write the name of the country you're in. It's just interesting to see where people are. Okay, we've got US, Canada, Netherlands. Neurofi is actually a Dutch company, so whoever's in the Netherlands, that's pretty cool. My co-founder is from the Netherlands. Portugal, France, England. Nice. Okay, range of different spots. Let me ask you this question. How old are you? Remember, everything is always anonymous in this software. Just curious to see what the age demographic is for everyone here. Okay. Interesting. And then if I asked you this question, remember it's all anonymous voting. How would you personally rate young people's mental health? 10, you think it's amazing. 1, you think it's in a really bad spot. You can just slide along the scale and give your answer. Okay. Interesting. So 4.3 average. And then if I ask you this question, how would you rate your own mental health? So you as a person right now, how would you rate your own mental health? 10, you're feeling amazing. 1, you're really struggling. Okay. Interesting. So we had a 4.3 and average of 7.2. If I ask you this one, what do you think is creating this challenge for our young people? You can write a word into that box. You can see there's an example there, like a basic example, like social media. It could be to do with friendships. It could be to do with lifestyle. It could be to do with anything that you think. And young people that are on the call, I'd love you to write what you think. What do you think is creating this challenge? Okay, so we got social media, wealth challenges, anxiety, climate change. Interesting, climate change is a big thing. How this software works is whatever is written the most becomes the biggest. Dissociation, media. Too many bad adult role models is a really interesting perspective, to be fair. I think there's a lot of stuff on the internet that doesn't role model particularly well. Alienation from self is good. Climate breakdown, social issues. Okay, so what we've basically spent our time doing is working with lots and lots of young people. I've now personally worked with about 5,000 different young people and had a lot of conversations and began asking them, like, how do you feel social media impacts you? How do you feel like your lifestyle might impact you? And at the same time, have really deeply studied this stuff myself and worked on how we improve these kind of things. The kind of main challenges we see with the social media specifically, like, I think it's very easy for our world to just say, oh, social media is bad and stuff like that. I'm someone that grew up on social media. I have social media accounts that I post on every day. And always have just loved social media. I've always found it a fun place to be. But I'm also very conscious of the negatives that can be created. So I don't have a perspective that's like, right, we need to just ban phones and get away from it. Phones are just the way of the modern world. And it's the way young people connect up and how we all connect up, to be honest. But there are some challenges that seem to be arising. Self-esteem is definitely a big thing. And there can be a lot of challenges around confidence as a result of the world of social. The general just like addiction to the phone, and it really is like a addictive process, this phone. If you put a human brain through a brain scanner and they drink alcohol or they scroll TikTok, an identical pattern with the dopamine functioning happens. So it is a genuine addiction and something that can be really hard to find space from. And when finding space from it, just like if an alcoholic tries to take some time off alcohol, they experience a withdrawal effect and they experience a big shift in their mood and how they feel. The exact same happens with the phone, which is something we're definitely underestimating as a society. Social media can make people quite fearful of our world. Climate change was mentioned. In general, the world can be pretty scary. And when I was even growing up, I grew up and social media was beginning to boom, but wasn't at the scale it is now. And when you're at school and kind of teenage age, you didn't have a clue what was going on in the world. And now it's just like pounded at the young people: climate change, war, AI, all this stuff. And it's not surprising that that's a scary world to feel like you're walking into. Comparison, big thing. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but it can't be underestimated how hard it is to constantly measure your life and your thoughts and your looks and everything against one another, something that before social media was never a possibility, except measuring your life against maybe the other people in your village or your town or something like that, which would have probably been pretty similar to you. So the comparison thing is big. The difficulty with focus, struggling with like procrastination and feeling really unproductive, which is something I know young people feel stressed about, but feel hard to kind of get into productive spaces. And then, of course, it can create that feeling of isolation and loneliness. And there's two sides to that. I really do appreciate that social media is also connecting young people together. But for a percentage of young people, they share with me that it can create feeling of exclusion. I mean, one girl I was talking to in the school earlier this week actually told me that she had had the experience of saying the wrong thing. Ironically, it was actually about climate change. She said the wrong thing in her group, and she experienced this week getting cancelled. And I was like, what do you mean you got cancelled? And just like we have these concepts like cancelling Donald Trump on Twitter, things like that, you can now as a young person actually get cancelled and effectively just like immediately what was the right word, like gotten rid of in your group chats and all that kind of stuff, which is just wild. So loneliness can be something that can definitely happen as a result. When you see that list of things, for you, which challenge do you see most in young people? When you're personally observing it, do you think it's low self-esteem? Do you think it's the addiction to the phone, fearful, anxiety kind of stuff? Which one's the standout one? If you look at your phones now, you can vote on that. If anyone wants to like get back into this software, just a reminder, menti.com on Google. You just search that on your phone on Safari or Chrome, and then you just put this code in here. Okay. So largely the fearful, anxious one, which is so fair. Like, it's just not surprising that that's the state the mind is in. It is very overwhelming to be growing up in a world where constantly the world is talking about all the chaos that's taking place. It's a scary world to be growing up in. If you had a hunter-gatherer tribe and you turned out they were all calm and peaceful and healthy and happy, and you turned up with some iPhones and said, look at all this chaos happening in all the nearby forests, you can imagine it made them pretty anxious. And we're living in a world where we're mass consuming scary stuff effectively. So the mind is fearful. You then have the issue with friendships and stuff like that can also create fear and anxiety. Addiction, phone addiction, self-esteem, loneliness, poor focus, and comparison. Okay. And then another thing to understand is it's not just social media, this challenge. There's many other things taking place. And this is something that young people really share with me. They want this perspective understood because, yes, social media is having an impact, but the phone isn't the only problem here. And when you look at the lifestyle change that's taking place, and this is where the neuroscience stuff begins to play a big part, especially from like how I've studied this topic, is the world now is very oriented towards let's spend all of our life on tech. And as a result, it's having a big impact on other things. So less of a connected social life. Like, for example, if anyone here that's like my age and above, you may remember back to your youth, spending your time after school, cycling to the park and hanging out with your mates and going to the forest and having a lot of independence and a lot of really connected social life. And if you look at the statistics of number of days and hours spent outside of the family home in the evenings after school and on the weekends, it is falling off a cliff over the last decade. Young people are spending a lot of time more isolated in their homes, which when you look back at all the fun you had as a kid, it probably was when you were connected up with your mates. So this is big. Nutrition is changing massively, and this is something that can't be underestimated at all. Nutrition and mental health are unbelievably interconnected. There's a brain chemical called serotonin that lots of you, I'm sure, will have heard of. Serotonin is the one that connects with the medications that many people take. Things like SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And serotonin, this brain chemical and body chemical responsible for your mood and your emotions, 95% of that chemical is made inside our body, inside our digestive tract. If crappy nutrition comes in, serotonin really can't function, and it's very easy to not eat healthily these days. Sleep is reducing massively, also a huge factor. We recently had a school go through our big testing processes, and the average time spent asleep for 15-year-olds was 4.5 hours a night, which is not enough sleep. Young people need loads of sleep, and it's too tempting to spend the whole night on TikTok now. Sleep is big. Movement is reducing, and these seem like basic ideas. However, this is what a human needs. We spent 400,000 years running around in forests, in the sunlight, connected up, eating well, sleeping lots. We need these things. And we, with our process, and I'll show you in a moment, have started adding these things into young people's lives in a nice, fun and achievable way. And it's ridiculous how simple changes can make a big difference. And with that, sunlight, simply time spent outdoors, is reducing. And sunlight as well, like the nutrition one, massively connects with the serotonin chemical. And I'm sure when you wake up and it's sunny outside and think, oh, it's sunny, you get a little mood boost. Then you spend some time in the sun and you get a mood boost. These things are not to be underestimated. So if you look at those ones, what do you think is the biggest cause of the challenge for young people's mental health? The social media, reduced social life, unhealthy food, lack of sleep, lack of movement, lack of sunlight. What's your perspective? You can vote on your phones now. Okay. Interesting. So quite a range of different perspectives as to what it is. Reduced social life, lack of sleep being a really big one, actually the biggest one. The lack of sleep thing is absolutely huge. When you go into the biochemistry of what happens to our brain when it gets a lack of sleep, the impact on anxiety, on motivation, energy, irritability, it's so huge. So these things are very important. And we have challenges where we do stuff with like the family unit, and we get like parents completing challenges with their kids and stuff like that, where they'll try 3 days where they all charge their phone out on the landing at nighttime instead of all charging them by their heads at night. Simple things like that. It's so ridiculous how much like bonding over the difficulty of the challenge, because we all love lying in bed on our phones, bonding over the difficulty of the challenge and then the impact it has of way more sleep. These are steps that can be taken. So just to give you a bit of an idea as to what we do to finish off, these chemicals, you may have heard of some of these. Dopamine is the one that creates all of our drive as a person. Oxytocin is basically what bonds us up as humans. It's the one that's released most predominantly as a human when a mum gives birth. During that birthing moment, the baby and the mum experience a monster surge of oxytocin, connects them together, really affects love and relationships and all that kind of stuff. Serotonin basically has a capacity to calm our body down. And then endorphins really affects our physical health. And over the last few years, we've been going through the process of how do we get young people to understand this science stuff, because it appears that young people like to have like quite an evidence-based approach to the changes they're making in their life. They don't just want to be told by adults, oh, do this, get off your phone, do that. They want like a realistic perspective as to why these kind of things are good. And what we've basically done is created this thing called the Dose avatars. And we've got basically 20 behaviors that we help young people progressively add into their life, 5 in each of these chemicals. And you can read some of these now. You can see things like deep focus and helping them with their discipline and time off of their phones and their confidence and physical touch. Interestingly, that physical touch one, we always go into schools, and there's this really interesting study that Yale did, Yale University, that discovered that if a human averages 7 hugs a day for a 30-day period, you see unbelievably significant changes in respiratory health, immune health, mental health. And I go into schools and I always ask the kids, how many hugs do you think you average a day? And it's always dominant 1. They think maybe they get 1 hug a day. And at that point, I say to the audience, okay, we've all got to get up and hug each other. And they look at me and they hate me for saying that, because they're like, oh, I don't want to hug all my friends. That'd be awkward and weird. And then they all hug each other. They sit back down, they're all buzzing, they're laughing and smiling. And it's so funny how the sudden change, just because humans are designed to physically connect with each other. And I always come back after the oxytocin session, and the physical touch thing is so significant. If young people hug each other more, and it seems like a simple idea, they feel safer around each other. A lot of young people don't feel that safe with each other. So these are big steps to take. You can see other things: sunlight, sleep, music, exercise. And what we basically do is we get them to select one primary one from each chemical, and they build out their dose. So they have these 4 core behaviors that they're working on in their life, and then they keep going from there. Big things that we think, just to finish off, is really, really powerful for young people is just a reduction in time spent on social media, not eliminate it. I love social media. They love social media. I am one of them effectively, but that's a big factor that does help them. More social life. We get them really doing challenges to get them more socially active. They actually win prizes, like being able to like go out for lunch with their mates and all that kind of stuff to get them socializing, and just a feeling from their parents that they have more freedom, because our world's become progressively more controlling for young people and a bit more like fearful around young people's lives. Feeling like they have some freedom and some independence has been something we've seen real value in. Stronger relationships, that's within their friends, and also the family unit. Strengthening the family unit is really important. In general, healthier lifestyles with the food and the sleep and the exercise. And the final one, which is so interesting, is just helping them increase their discipline. And you'd think like, oh, they're not going to like that, and I hate being told they have to be more disciplined. But we get young people doing things like, right, I'm going to be more disciplined with making my bed when I wake up, and tidying my room, and more disciplined with my work and all that kind of stuff. And the human brain likes discipline. That's why when you tidy your house, you don't like the idea of doing it, but after you've done it, you get a buzz and you get a good feeling off doing it. We are designed to be a disciplined creature. And when you add more discipline into young people's life, they feel more empowered effectively and more in control of what they're doing. So with that, which one do you think is the most important? More social life and more freedom, stronger relationships, healthier lifestyles, more discipline, or less social media? I always love this because it's always so interesting just seeing what people's perspectives are. Stronger relationships is so big. It's so big. So it's interesting that that's the biggest one. Healthier lifestyles. And you can see like the answer to this isn't necessarily just let's all get off social media. And that's like the least picked one here. There are many other things that we can do, that we can therefore live in a world where we love our phones and we love tech and we love all these things. But if we do create healthier lifestyles, stronger foundations in our relationships, have better social lives, these things can make significant differences to the world of young people's mental health. Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully we can chat now and ask questions if you'd like to. There's my Instagram. If you scan that, you can have daily advice over on there. So ironic to end with saying go on social media. However, that's where we get our message across. So feel free to join if you'd like to. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, TJ. That was amazing. Yeah, so much good information there. And please, if you haven't already, TJ, put in the chat where people can reach you. And it's a perfect segue into kindness. And Chris, we're dying to hear about the Kindness Project and how you got it created with Charlotte. And tell us where it's taken you and what have you learned? What do you apply to your lives?
So it's been a really interesting journey, Paula. I mean, I think for me, the journey into kindness started when I was probably about 8. And you see, Charlotte's heard this story 12 million times, so I've got to apologise first for talking about it again. And I was brought up in a suburb, not a suburb, East London, not a particularly salubrious area. It was quite a rough part of East London. But I was one of those kids when I was younger who was always, a lot of schools have a bench, and that bench is where kids used to sit when they didn't have anybody else to talk to. Well, I was the kid who used to go over to that bench and talk to other people. And when I was about 8 or 9, the school awarded me a prize. It's what every 8 or 9-year-old wanted. It was a plate. It was a Chinese willow pattern plate. I mean, what am I going to genuinely do with that at 8 years old? I don't know. But the pride on my mum's face when I came home and showed her that plate showed me how important kindness was to her. And I think that's where the sort of the value of kindness originally came from in my life, through my mum, through looking at sort of her values and acquiring that. And then about 6 years ago now, something like that, I was trying to do what I believe is the strangest job in the world, the job of dad, because it's one of those jobs where you go, you know what, I think I've got this. And then it changes every time. You go, oh no, I haven't got this. I'm sort of trying to still work out how to do it. And you've heard from Charlotte today, and you clearly know that I learn a lot more from her than she learns from me. But what I wanted to do is maintain that dialogue. I wanted to make sure that we had something that we could work on, that we could do together and we could be really proud of. And at the same time, I was going through a bit of a transition. So I'm 45 now. Started this when I was just coming up to 40. And there was a lot of anxiety in my life because I was watching way too much news. I was turning on the news and thinking, is this the world that we live in? Because my lived experience was actually most people are generally pretty decent. But you turn on the news and you don't get those messages. So
yeah, I mean, we used to like watch you fall asleep to it, and we'd go, "That's not good for him. That's not good for him."
It's not good.
Oh my gosh! So tell us a kindness project that leaves you so inspired, because you've had podcasts for 6 years, right? And been interviewing.
Yeah, we've
yes.
So started the podcast. Started off week 1, we had 17 listeners, Paula, and I thought, this is rubbish. This is the least popular podcast in the world. And our producer is my brother. He helps us do the technical side of the podcast. Week 2, we had 12 listeners, so we actually went down in listeners. But now we get 50,000 downloads a month, and it's the 4th most popular podcast in the world about kindness. So we've been on a
couple of lists. Spotify put us on a list once. We got tagged in something on Instagram, and I remember like being in the middle of the school day and it popped up on my phone, and I was like, I've got to send this to the group chat. It's got to go to the group chat. It's got to go. Yeah, it's sort of, it's funny to think that it's that big because it started in the garage and it doesn't really move away from the dining room table now.
I mean, it's effectively Charlotte and I interviewing amazing people who are doing good things in the world, but fundamentally it just comes back to me trying to maintain us trying to have a good laugh in the chat. But I suppose what stories have inspired? What stories have inspired you?
I didn't get the chance to get involved in a lot of the interviews because, you know, you usually do the middle of the day. I remember we did one very early on, I want to say, with the butterflies, and there were butterflies going up across the world and people would just take pictures with them. And it wasn't that it was something that was incredibly costly or incredibly, it was just something people stumbled upon every once in a while and it brightened their day.
Yeah.
And it was just something that wasn't meant to make it wasn't meant to change the world. It was just supposed to change a moment, I guess, in a way.
It's really interesting. I think when we talk about it, I've got two examples. One super local to us, and one super international. So I think the one that inspired me the most was two ladies that I spoke to run an organisation called kindness.org in New York. And they do scientific research into the benefits of kindness. They do amazing work. And I think the thing that inspired me the most was a question they asked me at the end, which was, how could we all be just 10% kinder? So not fundamentally changing our lives, but just doing one extra thing every day that is just a little bit more helpful to somebody. And framing it in that way was really interesting to me, because it meant that I didn't have to fundamentally change my life to actually just make the world a better place.
I think it can be incredibly difficult to look at a massive problem like mental health, whether that's youth mental health or anything like that, and go, how do I affect that? But it's not so difficult to look at someone's having a bad day, how do I make that better? Like it and everything can come down to small moments, because we're looking at things in the entirety of the problem can be a lot and overwhelming. We're looking at changing small moments in someone's life, being kind and just being the good in someone else's day can make a difference in a way that doesn't seem sort of overwhelming or too much for you to do. And like, you know, it doesn't cost that much to be kind. It's something that people can just do and be.
And actually, for us, the more we've learned, I've learned a lot interviewing people over the last 5 years. And number, I suppose, the two elements that are most important to me in the next stage of my life are empathy and curiosity. I want to get more curious and more empathetic, because I think what interviewing others has taught me is the importance of just listening, as we've said today. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed is understanding a little bit about the scientific benefits of kindness, because as TJ said, all of these chemicals are generated by you doing good for others. So the benefit of being kind to others. But so my international story was that one in New York. I think one of my favourites was a lady we interviewed that lives in our part of Essex, literally 5 minutes drive from our house. And I read about her in the local paper, and she had a change in perspective that came on from a cancer diagnosis. So she had breast cancer, and she went, you know what, I can't waste any more time. I've got to do something positive. And every year now, she dresses up as an elf at Christmas, because she absolutely adores Christmas, and delivers Christmas presents to every single children's hospice in the UK. And her story about gratitude, understanding the fact that she's survived that experience, and she's meeting these kids who are actually sort of got far shorter lives than her, has just changed her entire perspective of life. It's been amazing.
Yeah. And I think we sit and record the podcast, and it is a laugh for us, but sort of putting it out into the world, we've had people who've like come up to you and been like, I've listened to it and it's made my day. And that's the whole sort of point of it, is you just have to do good and make someone feel good just for a moment, even if it's just for a moment.
What was really interesting, Paula, for us was the origins of the podcast came from a place where, when I was feeling quite lost. So 6 years ago, didn't think I had the skills to be a particularly good dad. Still don't. Still learning that one, to be honest. Trying my best. But also optimistic about the world, but not getting the messages of optimism in a way that I fall off the desk. You know, that's good. I needed. And the same, funny enough, happened during lockdown, didn't it? During COVID. So during COVID, we did a Facebook Live every morning of the first UK lockdown. And we had an audience, I don't know, a few hundred people that used to attend that every morning. And we were just trying to be there. I don't know, they're not inspiration because it wasn't, but they were helping us as much as we were helping them. Just a community.
I know. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we're yes, I know we're coming to a close here. So it's a perfect segue here, Chris, because I'm connecting it up with TJ's work, right? And TJ probably tell us all the chemicals, the reactions that are going on inside the body with all of this kindness. But with that, we just have a few more minutes. So I'm going to invite Jim Garrison back in and see if the questions and comments we have or reflections by Jim being the listener on the other end, and just bringing in this, the idea of hope comes to me so strongly from this. I'm just interested to hear from you, Jim, on your end, and what are the solutions that people can experience. And can be very simple, from acts of kindness, to attending summer programs where they have a reframe and building up out of community, to learning about dose and the interactions of our body and how we can really understand that to put it to good use. In hearing from the youth, I'd just love to hear your comments, Jim, on what you've heard and where we can take this forward.
Well, first of all, thank you, Paula, for assembling this extraordinary group of people, both young and older, for this kind of discussion, because I think it has really been informative, first of all, to hear from the young people what they're going through day by day in their schools. I think TJ, that app that you've got is quite extraordinary, man. And I think you're touching on all the issues that are out there, and to have it in a participatory, interactive way, I think is really quite extraordinary. And I would love to learn more about it and maybe integrate it in some way with what we're doing, because I think you're providing quite a service. And I would just make a comment that if you've seen the Netflix documentary called Social Dilemma, that was put together by Tristan Harris and others, and I would encourage particularly the young people, if you haven't seen it, to watch it. I think it's a must watch for anybody wanting to pay attention to what's really going on. And what they point out to Paula's statistics about youth is that in 2007, 2 technical innovations occurred. One was Facebook, and the other one was the iPhone. And you can track all the negative indicators that TJ was laying out, and Katrina and Casper and others were talking about, just started to spike with the accelerated unfolding of social media in our world, particularly among the young. So I wanted to really make the general point that there's a direct connection between our social media and the loneliness, alienation, and anxiety that is proliferating around the world. And I wanted to also draw in a point that you made, Casper, about artificial intelligence. Social Dilemma brings this out, but if you're watching the news these days with Chat GPT and other developments in artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence is being used by Facebook, by Google, by Apple, by Twitter, by all these big media companies to actually accentuate the addictive qualities of social media and the isolation, loneliness, and herd mentality around certain ideological frameworks. So we can't discount that particular component in the general malaise of young people, because when I grew up, it was whatever problems you had were generally caused by another human being. You could have an abusive father. In my case, I went to an abusive missionary school out in the island of Taiwan and had traumas and so forth and so on. But at least it was, I would say, normal. Now, the trauma is being introduced and accentuated by non-human forces. And that's something that I think all of us need to take in. So how we use media social media is important, as TJ is doing, and Chris and Charlotte are doing with their podcasts and so forth and so on. But we need to really be aware that we have forces unleashed around the planet that are designed for harm. And when you think that almost every person on Earth carries their smartphones on their body, so in addition to the social media component, we're allowing electromagnetic waves to interact with our brain function, our body function, our emotional functions all the time, just because we possess it. You get a measure of some of the challenges that the young people are really facing today unconsciously, simply by having a product that is being really foisted on them, so that everybody has one of these characteristics. So I wanted to point that out as part of the complexity, but I also wanted to bring in something that I find unbelievably exciting and positive that just happened, actually, as it turns out, in the United States, in the state of Tennessee, where two young Black men in their 20s, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, were expelled by the Tennessee legislature for taking part in a protest at the Capitol in Nashville, Tennessee, around the mass shootings that have been happening around the United States that had just happened in Nashville. And they were expelled by the essentially all-white adult legislators. And the result of that expulsion was to create a global meme of celebration of these young people who were extraordinarily articulate. I mean, at the level of Martin Luther King articulate, and the vice president flew in, and they were invited to the White House, and it caused such a consternation in the news that they're now being readmitted back to the Tennessee legislature. And I think I want to note this because one of the things that both of these young Black men said is that adults, Gen Z is coming, Gen Alpha is coming, and we're going to soon be a majority in the voting demographic. And we denounce racism, we denounce mass shootings, we denounce the coercive force that is being exercised around the world against the trans and the all of that, and we're not going to be denied. And I just, as a father of two children, millennials, I just was thrilled to see the potency and the power that's coming out of your generation. So I just want to say that no matter how bad it is or seems, the light always will find its way through the cracks. And you represent the light in the cracks. And in Milo, I really appreciated what you were saying, you know, and Casper, I love Casper. He's been coming to Chartres for all these years and has been just a bright, shining light. And Charlotte, you know, what you're doing with your dad, it's just beautiful, man. It's just extraordinarily beautiful. So I want to bring in the potency of the young, and to say that you look back over history, most of the revolutions that have taken place that have reshaped and transformed human affairs have been transacted by young people. And that's you. We older people can assist and do everything we can to feed you and love you, like TJ's saying. We all got to up our hug quotient. But you're now the leaders. You're the leaders. And so remember that. And that's why at Chartres, we want to have, you know, this Jedi warrior school that Paul is more sophisticated than I am and calls it a destiny code meets weird, because we're going to be going into the magical aspects of the weird, the druidic culture, and so forth and so on. But this is a time of great concern, but it's also a time of great celebration of the fact that life, in the end, will not be denied. So I just want to thank you all for that. And just, I know we're a little bit over time, but I'd love to have like 30 seconds, starting with you, Casper, then Milo, then Charlotte, TJ, and then maybe Chris, then the Paula, just to close us out with some word of inspiration. Casper, why don't you start?
So I think the youth should feel and kind of learn to accept themselves. And in accepting and validating yourself, you can go out and change the world and kind of push the old way of thinking out and bring in this new way of validation and free speech and doing what we want to do and making a better world so everyone's equal rather than people standing on different shaped boxes.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. And you can see that Katrina just popped in. Love your hair, Katrina. Give us 30 seconds of inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just a lot of helping our youth today and letting them know that they're not alone and bringing us together and helping them navigate these hard years, maybe the hardest years of their life. Just helping them get through it so we can kind of help improve those numbers that Paula gave us at the beginning and just really help our youth of today.
Thank you so much. Good luck with everything. Milo.
Maybe just like for today's youth, like try just listening to what they have to say and hearing them out and just be there for them.
Yeah. In the end, you got to just love them. Thank you so much. Charlotte.
I guess don't just expect the youth of today to just be told what to do. If you're going to tell them what to do, you need to explain why they've got to do it. Otherwise, they're not going to accept it. We want to understand. We don't just want to be told.
Cool. Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, I think it was actually something you said, Jim, and I am a natural optimist, but for me, those shards of light breaking through the concrete is the bit that I is the bit that I always focus on. And I suppose if I'm leaving anybody with anything, it's that element of saying, what can we do to be a little bit kinder to each other?
Yeah. That's actually from Leonard Cohen. You know, cracks are where the light comes through.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, cool. TJ.
Thanks, Jim. I think as we've shared, just being laser focused on empowering and providing the young people with their voice to say how we can navigate this challenge. If it's them that are experiencing this real difficulty, they're going to know what the solution is. It's going to be in there, and every generation gets its big challenge. We've had many, many challenges before in our society. I'm sure for thousands of years, there's always something new that society has to try and solve. And I really do have an optimistic view on mental health. I think things have changed really, really quickly in the last 10 years. I think COVID really, really changed society fast. But I think progressively, like these events like tonight, attention is getting drawn towards this, and big changes could happen that could move our young people into a much better space.
Thank you. And good luck with your app, man. I would love to have you back to more fully, because I think you're on to something very profound and that could have a potent effect improving lives of everybody, actually, because it's not just the young people who are needing your app.
Sure.
Everybody does.
Yeah, we train all the parents and the teachers as well, and it's like a collective. Everyone has to go up together for us to all feel good, for sure.
Yeah, it takes a village for sure. So thank you so much. So Paula, give us a final word and close out here.
Oh, just deep gratitude to everybody joining in today. And my takeaway is around yours, Jim, of great hope and this uniting with youth to help them move into what Casper pointed out was taking action and feeling that they have an active role in the solution, and building communities around that is important, I feel, of deep listening and moving into that action state. So I appreciate Ubiquity. I look forward to the summer at Charts, and for the youth joining us in that experience of community and love and hope and empowerment. So thank you everyone,
Paula,
for joining.
And as we close, just to build on what Paula just said, any of you parents out there with young people, teenagers, 20-somethings that would be interested in coming to Chartres to really experience a deeper dive into how we can more fully understand the challenges of youth, but how we can more deeply empower them to navigate an increasingly complex world with the kind of capacities they need to really lead humanity into the next phase of human development. Casper is going to be there. He's going to be one of the facilitators with Paula. I just put the link in the chat. So we welcome all of you to join us July 2nd through 8th in Chartres. And you can register on the ubiquityuniversity.org website. The link is right at the top of the homepage. So thank you, Paula, all of you. It's been a wonderful session. This brings us to a close. You're all welcome to join the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. And then we'll see you again tomorrow, where we'll explore Chartres from a different vantage point of the faculty that'll also be joining our pilgrimage there. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
program.
you. Thank you so much.